Talk some Chiefs, guys. Welcome to the Chief of the North Mailbag Thursday, a new segment we're going to be doing every week here on RGR Football. I am Seth Kaiser, the Chief in the North, now wearing Chief in the North swag, which is red. You can't make fun of me for wearing Raiders colors or Chargers colors or whatever colors that help are a little more slimming on me. Now, there is a Chief of the North black shirt, so you're just going to have to deal with the incongruity of how that all works. Look, it's Thursday. You guys gave me a bunch of mailbag questions. I want to answer each and every one of them. And so that's what we're going to be doing here every Thursday. On Wednesdays, I'll put out a tweet asking for mailbag questions. You guys were kind enough to respond. Don't forget to check out Monday's video, the Keys to the Kingdom, where we kind of went over the things that we were going to be covering this week, which are things that I did, in fact, cover this week. And just as a little primer on the things that have already been covered on the Chief of the North newsletter, one of the things I wrote about that I really enjoyed just yesterday, actually, is Trent McDuffie and Josh Williams. If you go to the Chief of the North Substack, you can go to bit.ly/SethReallyHatesMoney or MinnesotaChiefsFan.substack.com. This one is unlocked for everyone to read. And I'm showing a little video clip here, just as a little preview, a primer of it. Right here at the top of the screen, you've got Trent McDuffie, who was absolutely, in an incredibly small sample size, phenomenal against the Bears, showed great feet, great anticipation, understanding of leverage. He was physical. He basically, and I wrote about it, breaking it down on a snap-by-snap basis, he basically had a perfect first outing in a limited sample size. The Chiefs did not keep him on the field for long. He was only out there with the first team. He's given the full-fledged starters treatment. Like I wrote here, he's practically the wide receiver's jacket, but he's clearly a starter. It's going to be him and L'Jarius Sneed as the two starters. And then I'm assuming if he's healthy, Rashad Fenton will be the third guy. But another guy that I wrote about, Joshua Williams, he actually did some stuff of his own, showing off really intense physicality, the ability to redirect routes. He played well, not as well as McDuffie. He did show he doesn't have the same lateral agility. He got lost in zone once or twice, at least from what I could tell without knowing the coverages. But you can see on snaps like this how he's such a huge corner. He's 6'3", he's 200 pounds. He's got great length. He's got arms like almost as long as George Karlaftis, who has short arms for a defensive end, but I digress. He is able to redirect routes really consistently and throw off the timing of receivers in a way. Like if you look at this right here, the timing of this route is done already. There's nothing that's going to be done here. He's essentially ruined any chance of this route succeeding because NFL routes are timing based. Everything that you generally want to do when you're running routes at the NFL level, you have 3-step, 5-step, all that kind of stuff. The quarterback is looking for spots. And if you're able to throw them off their spot, throw them off their timing, unless the play breaks down, generally speaking, you're able to ruin the play. So check that out if you want to take a look at that. Another thing that we took a look at that I'm really excited about was Skyy Moore. I wrote about him. He was only targeted a few times, but I wrote about some of the plays that he wasn't targeted in addition to the ones that he was, and how he demonstrated right here. You're probably looking at the picture rather than, looking at me. You see the releases that he was getting, which is kind of his bread and butter, and is the thing that I was excited to watch about him on Saturday. His ability to get free off the line. He didn't get targeted here, although there really was room for a hole shot here with the safety kind of staying in the middle of the field. If the quarterback simply keeps the safety here with his eyes, he's got a hole shot right here that you would either get a big gain, maybe even 6. It just depends on whether or not you're looking for more initially. But what I love about this snap, the corner is attempting to press. And if you look closely here, and again, you can find this broken down in a lot more detail at the Chief of the North Substack. If you look right here, so you've got the corner who's got his left leg forward because he's jamming on that inside leverage because Moore takes an initial step inside with a fake. And so when the cornerback reaches forward to jam that right shoulder of Moore with his left arm, he necessarily has to reach in and put himself a little bit off balance. He does that because of the fake that Moore makes inside. But Moore is so quick that by the time he's starting to make contact or attempt to make contact with Moore's inside shoulder, thinking that's the leverage that he's trying to get, Moore's already planting with this leg and heading outside. And so you can see that, and obviously pixelated, what are you going to do? You can see with this left arm, he's trying to jam him here, but he's already moving this way. And so this jam with just a little swat, a dip of the shoulder, it's not accomplishing anything other than to put him off bounce here while Moore's already planting. And you see on just the very next step, the corner still is trying to he's trying to plant that left foot to run with him, but you can see where his right leg is. This is not a good position to be in because you can't really drive off your leg like that, whereas Moore's already accelerating. This route is already over. It just has yet to play itself out in terms of grabbing this kind of quick separation. And so that type of play, grabbing that kind of separation, the releases at the line, and I wrote about multiple other plays from Moore showing a real knack for getting some separation out of his breaks, and especially off the line. That's what makes me excited about him, as well as a couple of really tough catches that he made. All right, that's enough about a little brief primer on what we have covered this week. Let's get to your mailbag questions. You guys asked a lot. I'm going to try to go through as many as humanly possible here. Uncle Glenny, I'm just going to call you by your names on Twitter here. I'm going to do the best I can. Maybe I'll just go with your ad handle no, because I'm going to mispronounce that. So Uncle Glenny, Glenn, always good to see you, AKA formerly known as Ram on Arrowhead Pride. I'm not wearing flip-flops today. Sorry, Glenn. He asked, if you could duplicate any player on the team to have two of them starting, who would it be? For example, two Chris Jones starting at defensive tackle, or Orlando Brown starting at right and left tackle. You get the drift. I do get the drift, Glenn. I thought about this one for a little bit because this is an awesome question. If it's someone that has to be to start and play for the team, then that leaves out Mahomes because, two quarterbacks, you can't have it. And I actually thought about initially saying, well, Mahomes, and then I trade him for, a bazillion picks. But I don't know if I want another Patrick Mahomes in the league. That's how uniquely great Patrick Mahomes is. And so basically what it comes down to for me at this point would be you've really got two options, in my opinion, if you're going to have two guys starting for the team. And that is either two Chris Jones or two Travis Kelce's. Now, Travis Kelce, because he's getting a little longer in the tooth, but he's still just so great. The matchup nightmares that you could give teams by running out of two tight end sets constantly with two Travis Kelce's, that's so appealing. But the ability of Chris Jones as a pass rusher, that's just too much for me to give up. Obviously, you only have one 3-tech any given down, but he's so gifted rushing from the interior that's what I would go with is two Chris Joneses, just because that alone, even just with one other average guy, is the basis of a high-level pass rush. Winters on 3. Question for new fans. What happens with the contract money when the Chiefs release people during camp? Like imagine Rojo. Does contract become void? Does he still get all the money? Yada, yada, yada. It depends on the structure of the contract. It depends on guarantees, depends on bonuses. So the short answer is it depends. You're often going to see guys at the NFL level without a lot of guaranteed money. And so what ends up happening is when they get released, that's it. It's over. Players usually get paid some during training camp, but they get paid weekly or bi-weekly during the season, usually weekly. And so guys that get released in camp, that's a hard gig for them. That's a tough gig for them. And money that's already been paid in the form of bonuses, they don't get any more. It just still counts against the cap as dead money. Championship swagger. I like that. Championship swagger. He asks, is it better for a player to have a higher ceiling or floor, in my opinion? Assuming that you have to sacrifice one for the other. So would I rather have a team made up of guys with really high floors but lower ceilings, or guys with really low floors but really high ceilings? I think if you were going to make up an entire team of guys like that, I think I got to go with the higher floor. Generally speaking, outside of the quarterback position and maybe wide receiver and left tackle and the few other places, football is a game of avoiding weakness, especially like on the defensive side of the ball. If you had a defense made up of 11 genuinely average players, or maybe so again with a high floor, let's say that high floor is average to above average. If you had a defense made up of 11 average to above average players, you'd have a really good defense, because defense is a lot about avoiding weaknesses as much as it is having strengths in any one particular area. Same with the offensive line. can be quite similar with your receiving room, although having a superstar there is a big deal. That's one reason why people are a little concerned about the Chiefs' ceiling on offense this year. But really, avoiding problems is almost as important as having superstars at a lot of positions, if not more so important. So if I had to make up a team besides the quarterback position, I would say a higher floor. Chiefs crab fan. This is going to be one of my favorite things, and I actually forgot about this from doing mailbags before, is just reading people's names in real time. I'm going to end up like swearing or something because of one of your names. Don't do that to me. What do you think is a realistic record for the Chiefs to have this season? Also, how many wins will they need to win the division or make the playoffs? I think they need to win 11 games to make the playoffs. I think they need to win 12 to win the division. So actually, I'm going to say 10 for the playoffs, 12 for the division, and I think they win the division. I think there are a lot of people very excited about a lot of teams in the AFC West, and that makes sense. They've made a lot of progress. That said, it's hard to bet against Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes at this point. Casey Grossnickel asks, who will be Mac Lee Award winner at 101 Banquet in March, the Chiefs Rookie of the Year? I am torn. 3 rookies were wildly impressive in their debut in Karlaftis, McDuffie, and Moore. All 3 of them played really well. I've charted every snap. You can find it at the newsletter. All 3 of them in my reviews played really, really well. Josh Williams played well, not as well as McDuffie, but the thing that I think is going to separate it, I could be wrong here. I'm not 100% sure. I think some of it depends on Juju Smith-Schuster's health. His knee is acting up on him. That's unfortunate. But I think Skyy Moore's not going to get as many chances given the wide receiver rotation they're going to have. So I think in terms of pure opportunity, I think McDuffie especially and also Karlaftis are going to get more opportunities. Based on what I saw, I think McDuffie is probably going to be the guy. I think Karlaftis will give him a run for his money. But it just kind of depends what we see moving forward. With Moore, it's going to depend on opportunity. Dunn says 2016 Alex Smith and a more gadgety, grindy offense got 12 wins. I believe a more consistent and less stoppable offense is to be found by returning to more of that with Mahomes at the helm and trying to optimize the offense for Mahomes, leading the Chiefs to Cincy stopping us. Your thoughts? I wouldn't say that it was it was the fact that the offense was less gadgety and grinded out, or even offensive design that really messed with them. They really actually were a lot more grinded out in the second half of 2021, and were the most efficient offense in the league down the stretch, being kind of a grinded out offense and adjusting to those too high shells. They adjusted really well down the back stretch of the year, and it became a really big story that kind of got snuffed out by the way the season ended for them. Patrick Mahomes actually commented on this during a presser, and it kind of flew under the radar that Cincinnati wasn't really showing anything different on defense in the second half of the AFC Championship as they showed in the first half. They dropped 8 multiple times in the first half, and the Chiefs were shredding it. Mahomes just played badly, and Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill both had some pretty crucial drops, and they just that's what happens. And one thing, when your quarterback's playing badly, you get fewer chances, right? Drops matter a lot more. A missed protection matters a lot more if your quarterback is playing poorly, because you're naturally not going to get as many chances to make it right, because you're going to get fewer drives because you're going to go 3 and out, or you're going to have picks or whatever, right? And so one drop by Kelce that he should have caught on a really crucial third down. It was a tough catch, but he should have made it. Tyreek Hill had one crucial drop, and then in overtime, he let Jesse Bates beat him over the top and really lost what should have been a contested catch. Those things matter way more when Mahomes is playing poorly, which he was. So I do think you're going to see more of what we saw in the second half of last season. Something to keep an eye on. I'm not going to have time to write about this week. The Chiefs' first team offense ran a ton from under center. Not just ran the ball, but I mean, their entire offense, they ran some play action, some stuff like that from under center. I'm curious if we see more of that in preseason week 2. I still think they're going to be primarily a shotgun-based team, but down the stretch last year, they played from under center way more, partly to kind of mess with teams and make them pay and for these too high shells, and kind of make them pay with a little more traditional play action. Stay Woke says, Kelce has been so consistent the past 6+ years. Will we see a drop-off sometime soon? Are there any signs of that, or with the direction of the game? Can the tight end continue to be dominant going to mid-30s? Thanks. You're welcome. He was still dominant last year. I will say he is definitely not as explosive as he was 2 or 3 years ago. He is open just as often though. With every year, I'm curious about it in terms of how he deals with physicality. I don't know if he haunts the weight room the way George Kittle does. When you look at the two of them, they're just built different. Kelsey's just not built as swole, for lack of a better term. He's built a little more lean, a little more like a oversized receiver. Although again, he blocks well for what the Chiefs ask him to do, but I'm not going to go down that road. Based on what we saw last year, he can still be dominant. He could be 90% of what he was last year and be the best receiving tight end in the league. It's just going to be a matter of how gradual that descent is. The way he wins right now is he's an incredible route runner and he reads defenses so well. So those things tend to age very well. It's just going to be a matter of him going from absolutely dominant to really, really good, and then trying to figure out how long he wants to play at that level. I think the way he plays, I think he could play for another 5 years with health permitting. Sam Hunter says, big fan of your work set. Thanks, Sam. Based on what we've seen from the roster thus far, which 16 players do you think will make this practice squad? Sam, you ask too much, my friend. Ask me that again in like 2 weeks. I do think that, and this is going to cover one. I think Bouchel is going to make the practice squad. I think Fontaine's going to make the practice squad. I don't think he makes the final 53. But in terms of the exact practice squad guys, we just have so much sussing out to do over the next couple weeks. And that's something to remember. Preseason, by the time we get done with that first game, and we're like, oh, thank God, football's back. Now let's move on to the real games. These next 2 games are the most important games of about 40 guys on the roster's life. And they matter so much because whether they make the Chiefs practice squad, whether they make the final 53, or whether they just put forth good film as their resume, these games are their shot. So ask me again in a couple weeks. It's such a cop out. All right, we're going to keep going here. Kevin Kuzelka, man, you guys asked so many good questions. Without 2 walking bullseyes roaming the Chiefs defense on 3rd down in 2022, how do you think offenses attack the Chiefs defense in 2022? Which group gets picked on the most? I think it's going to depend on the pass rush. You're going to have a lot of young guys out in the secondary. McDuffie looks good, but there's always going to be rookie growing pains. Same with Josh Williams if he's on the field. Same with Brian Cook. I think Leo Chanel, if he's forced into coverage roles, he could get exploited, at least with what we've seen so far. But I think a lot of it's going to depend on the pass rush. If the pass rush is not consistent, then it's not really so much about getting picked on. It's just about the nature of coverage at the NFL level. You can only cover for so long. So that pass rush to secondary symbiotic relationship, that's going to be really important to keep an eye on. I don't see, depending on how it all plays out, the cornerback group is the one that really one would be the most concerned about because you've got a couple of young guys playing. But if you end up with a lineup of Snead, McDuffie, Fenton, Williams, that could be a very, very competent group depending on what the rookies do. So that's the one to keep an eye on because they're young. The early returns have been promising. So I don't know. Right. Adam Summer asks, which player on either O-line or D-line am I going to be searching for their jersey to buy after week 1? Considering I already have Chris Jones, probably George Karlaftis. Although if you don't already have a Creed Humphrey jersey, I can't help you. I don't know what to tell you. My large adult son deserves your love. So never mind what I said about Karlaftis, who I think is going to be a good player. Get a Creed Humphrey jersey. Don't wait for it. Don't think about it. Just go get a Creed Humphrey jersey. Stay Woke also asked, thanks for the second question, Stay Woke. How do you feel about Noah Gray, his development, what his role on the team is, if any? My guy, Nate Taylor, he loves Noah Gray. He thinks Noah Gray has looked great in practice this year, including with the pads on. We'll see. I didn't really see a ton of it once the games were going last season, and I didn't really see anything in preseason. I'm more of a Fortson guy personally. I think Fortson can do everything Gray can do it better, barring health, and he's back at practice. But with Gray, he seems to be willing and able to do the things that they ask him to do in terms of some of those moving, blocking assignments, lining up at H-back, running the routes they want. But he didn't show an ability to make contested catches last year or separate at an elite level. So we're just going to have to see. Thomas Harris says, between Orlando Brown and Frank Clark, which player has more to prove this season? Frank Clark by a country mile. Orlando Brown was a good left tackle last year. He wasn't a great one, but he was a good one, and better than I think. I think the contract stuff kind of soured some Chiefs fans to an extent, which, to be fair, that's what players have to do. They've got to try to get their money. This is how it all works. And some parts of that involves pushing the leverage that you have and exaggerating the strength of your position. But Orlando Brown's a good left tackle. He's going to get a good contract, barring a cataclysmic meltdown this year. He's going to get a good contract regardless, whether it's in Kansas City or elsewhere. Frank Clark did not have a good year last year. And he hasn't had a good year by his standards, or, I mean, an above average year for several years. So he's got a ton to prove. We'll see. I'm going to be keeping a close eye on him in preseason week 2. He looked faster in preseason week 1, but I don't know if it necessarily led to more wins in rushing the passer. Tom asks, if you had a magic wand and could pick one young player to, within reason, maximize their potential and turn it into production for this season, who would you pick? Oh, man. With all the young players, I think if it was absolutely maximizing their potential, turn it into production, I think I would have to pick. Man, it's hard between those first 3 picks. Whether you've got, well, not the first 3 picks because Skyy Moore was, but when you've got Karlaftis, McDuffie, and Moore, any one of those 3 guys maximizing their potential would be huge for the team. I think the one that would be the biggest deal, would be McDuffie, but man, Karlaftis is close behind him there. The only reason with Moore it wouldn't be the biggest deal is because I think they've got some depth at receiver, depending again on Juju Smith-Schuster's health. And with Mahomes, he's the one that really sets the ceiling for the offense. Let's see. Matthew Engel asks if is Chief North on Spotify. It's not. We're just here right now. We're thinking about reviving the podcast. We'll see what we decide to do. I'm not trying to create extra work for Ryan, and I'm not really great at doing any of that stuff. Jeremy McVeigh asks, what makes us think that Shelton will work with the Chiefs when he hasn't worked with all his other teams? I feel like we're making too much of him. I think Shelton's been able to be a run plugger guy who can't really rush the passer on multiple teams. I do think he's got a familiar name. People recognize him from the draft. So I don't think it's a huge deal that he's with the team, but I do think it at least provides them with someone who can do, to an extent, what Derek Nottie does. And I'm not sure if they have that on the roster. So that's helpful, but I don't know that he's going to be seeing the field much more than people think, unless Cullen thinks he can get more out of him than he got out of his previous stops. Brad Jaron, I'm really sorry, Brad, says very open-ended, but I'm so intrigued by these 3 linebackers. How do you see them being used? How do they complement each other? It's going to be primarily 2 linebackers. It's going to be Bolton at the Mike, the middle linebacker. It's going to be Willie Gay Jr. as the weak side linebacker. Leo, if you want to use that term. And then you're maybe going to see Chanel as the Sam. I think it's going to be for him more often when he's actually lining up off the line of scrimmage, offset from the defensive end, kind of like Reggie Ragland used to, like in 2019, because he's just shown a lot of limitations in coverage so far. Again, we'll see how that plays out. I'm really excited to watch him more closely in week 2 of preseason. His change of direction hasn't been great in camp in terms of coverage, but he does have good athleticism. He closes well downhill. He closes sideline to sideline. He hits hard. He does well with run fits. But I think people might be surprised at his lack of a role in year 1, at least. We'll see. In terms of Bolton, he looks like he's the guy that they're going to count on to be the leader of the group. He's going to be the guy making the calls, green dot guy, talking to the coaches. I am curious who they're going to have be the dime linebacker, because Willie Gay Jr. is their best coverage linebacker, but they've traditionally had their Mike, their middle linebacker, be the guy. And Bolton might just be competent enough in coverage to where he's fine there, but he's not the playmaker Gay is. Gay and Bolton complement each other well in that they're both very physical. They both move downhill quickly and well. Bolton's more of a thumper. He doesn't have Gay's athleticism. Very few linebackers do. And Gay's more rangy, but both of them are so physical and finish so well that they complement each other really well. JC Hooker says, BJ, I assume BJ Kissel, predicted that Karlaftis breaks the Chiefs rookie sack record set by DT. Is that a reasonable prediction or overhype? I'm trying to remember, and I'm going to look it up right now. I can't remember what that rookie sack record was in year one. Let's see, what did he have in terms? He had 10 sacks. Do I think Karlaftis will break 10 sacks? I think that is a pretty tall order, but I do think it's possible. It's going to depend in part on luck, though. He needs Jones or someone to chase maybe a couple into his lap, and then it's absolutely possible. I'm excited to watch him preseason week 2. He looked really good in preseason week 1. We'll see him now against a different offensive line. Chillin' Chief asks, when will Mahomes want a contract adjustment? My guess is probably 2027. I think that's the year. It's either 2026 or 2027 is when there's like this huge year where Mahomes' contract hits. It's something like a 60 million. It's something like a 60 million amount, give or take, in terms of what the cap hit looks like that year. And they can obviously mess with it. But that, I think, is going to be the impetus for them to maybe rework some things. It's 2027. He's got a $59.9 million cap hit. Of course, a huge part of that is a roster bonus that they can convert into a signing bonus. That's like 50 million of it. So the short answer is Mahomes signed this deal knowing it was going to be super long and knowing that the market was going to pass him by. And it would surprise me if it was prior to that 2027 year, and wouldn't surprise me if it was more like 2028, 2029, where we saw them really do some real work on it. That's my thought on it, given that he knew what he was doing when he signed that. Ricky Blazer said, do you think Noddy and Shelton can play together, or one of them end up backing the other one up? I don't think they can play together. They're replicating skill sets in terms of guys that are two gap, stuff the run, try to eat blocks, not really rushing the passer. On the goal line, I think they'll be really happy to have Shelton there. Casey Gross-Nicola asks, this one's really important. What did you name your new puppy? Thank you for asking. We named her Kiko, Kiko. It's Japanese for hope. As a lot of you know, I'm a quarter Japanese. Also, my older sister, who's a huge Chiefs fan, her name is Hope, and she was a vet tech, and she loves dogs of all sorts and that kind of stuff. And she's, whatever. So we just like the idea of a Japanese name, and then we ended up naming the dog after my sister in a weird way. I don't know, but it's Kiko. She's awesome. She's making friends with our chickens already. Jeremy H asks, and yeah, we got time for more. This is going to be good. He asks, do you ever worry that focusing on one team causes the overrating of fringe players as there are less comparables? That's a great question. So basically the idea is, if you just watch the Chiefs, and maybe he's directing at me, maybe not. Jeremy, this is a terrific question. I'm not going to assume you're directing at me, but you could be, because I write almost exclusively about the Chiefs. It's a great question. Yes is the answer. If you're only watching one team, it's going to lead you to both overrate and underrate players, because you just have no frame of reference. That's one reason why I chart and have charted other quarterbacks, charting other receivers from other teams, defensive linemen, offensive linemen. That's one reason why it's so valuable to chart guys' film from when they played, whether it's, when Clark was in Seattle, you chart some of the other guys there when Jaron Reed was in Seattle, just do easy examples. Orlando Brown's time with the Ravens, Juju Smith-Schuster with the Steelers. So you get a little more of a flavor for other guys when you review them as they're coming in, because you see how they look with other teams. But it really is a danger, and it's important to watch other teams on Sunday if you get a chance to get a frame of reference, because there are times where we fall in love with guys because we're familiar with their names and we think that they are maybe better than they are. And then you watch another team play and you say, wow, this guy's really nothing special when compared to what you see from other teams. There's also a risk of underrating guys, not realizing how tough it can be around the league. That's where I think like Andrew Wiley, who had some struggles Saturday. We'll see how he does. That he had a couple of tough snaps Saturday. But overall, the last couple of years, I think he's been a little underrated by Chiefs fans as an average offensive lineman. Average is a compliment at offensive line. There are very few teams in the league that have 5 guys that are average or better on the offensive line. There's a dearth of offensive line quality play in the league right now. It's a great question, and that's one reason why it is nice to watch other teams occasionally just to see what else is going on there. Lovey asks, I just finished watching game samples from 2019, 2021. Why can't the Chiefs run the ball? I understand from 1920, the O-line is more athletic, but they could have run more. Is Reed just a bad run play designer? I know it's preseason, but the run game wasn't good. You can't take anything from, second team, third team, any of that, because line play disparity becomes so important with those teams. Last year, they did not run the ball that well. Part of that was their running backs didn't play that well, except in spurts. And they did keep trying to kind of fit a square peg into a round hole in terms of how they tried to run the ball. But overall, an Andy Reid led team, he has had spurts of running the ball incredibly efficiently. It just, with him, it seems to depend on the back fitting the system really, really well. We'll see how it goes this year. It looks like they're planning more between the tackles, stuff that really fits kind of what their personnel can do well. I still don't think it's going to be as frequently as people want, but I do think it's going to be more efficient. So we'll see. But yeah, I mean, 2019, 2020, and 2019, 2020, before, the kind of the shift in the offensive line, you really did not have the kind of running game that you'd want. But I mean, they really have not had consistently a running back. Damian Williams struggled with health at times when he was, and in 2020, Clyde got hurt. And then plus the offensive line kind of went through some ebbs and flows that year. So I would just say it's not the featured part of Andy Reid's offense, and it shows, but it also has been an issue of personnel. Chiefly Bacon, longtime friend on Twitter. It's good to hear from you. Why do you think the Chiefs are so unbelievably successful at drafting cornerbacks? I don't know. Cornerbacks now, not quarterbacks. I realized that my phrasing there in a hurry made it sound like I said quarterbacks. I couldn't tell you. They have been really successful at it. We'll see what happens with this group, but they have had a lot of success. And I don't know. It's tough to say whether that is they're having an incredible amount of success drafting guys or Spagnuolo and Merritt, because that's when really you saw this start, are doing such a good job coaching up the guys they have that they're able to coax average to above average play out of guys with average talent. I don't think that's necessarily just it, because they found Charvarius Ward, who was kind of a diamond in the rough. They got him for nothing. Rashad Fenton has been an average corner. That's hard to be in the NFL. L'Jarius Sneed came out of nowhere. They do seem to find guys, and they're able to make it work with them. So I'm not sure whether it's necessarily, I think it's a combination. So we'll see this year if McDuffie and, say, Williams or Watson, whose film I like, he's not as athletic as Williams, but he's a huge guy, redirects guys well. If they show a higher level than what we've seen in the past, this year, next year, then you can chalk that up. Man, they really are. They're getting better at scouting guys up for the system they want. But the coaching staff deserves a ton of credit. Stephen C. Frazier, we got a few more here. So does Kansas City keep 2 or 3 quarterbacks? I say 2 to leave room for one more player in the squad who's young, has a lot of potential. I love this used movement. So in terms of with quarterbacks, they'll keep 2. They'll practice squad 1. I assume it's going to be Mahomes, Henny, and then Shane Buechele. They're going to practice squad him. That's how that's going to go. I kind of like Shane B, but that's just me. I think he's got a live arm, and he makes plays a little bit. Bassoon fun. There it is. For fantasy football, top 2 wide receivers to pick from Chiefs: Juju, guessing, and just curious if any will have production like Hill, or if you think it'll spread around the non-vet for the fantasy value. I don't think it's going to be easy to grab a Chiefs wide receiver this year. Juju would be my guess if he's healthy. The knee thing scares me. The fact that I've had Pittsburgh fans talk to me about the knee thing was pretty consistent for him the last couple of years. A lot of knee soreness, and that's something that maybe if it just doesn't go away, it doesn't go away, and that might rob him of some explosiveness week in and week out, maybe rob his availability at times. I think if he's fully healthy, I think it's him. If he's not, I think it's much more of a toss-up. It's going to be a week-by-week thing. But Skyy Moore is someone to keep an eye on, but that's a stash, in my opinion. That's a guy that you're going to get value later on. Guys like MVS and Hardman, you're completely reliant on big plays there a lot of the time. Unless MVS continues to show – he showed a little bit of chemistry with Mahomes in that preseason week 1. If he's able to make some of those contested catch plays and kind of break down on some of these scramble drills and become a guy that Mahomes can rely on to be a big-bodied guy who's able to make a few catches on those plays, in addition to some bigger plays, that might be a little bit interesting. Bretton Cole asks, how does MVS compare to Byron Pringle last year? Very different players. Pringle is more a guy who wins with a little bit of quickness and some toughness against contact. Whereas MVS is a deep threat. He's not necessarily a physical route runner despite his size. He can accelerate pretty well for a big guy. He's got good long speed. And so he's able to beat guys deep. That's been his game, the deep threat guy. That's why the completion percentage to him, for lack of a better term, is so low, because he's been almost exclusively a deep threat. He's been a down the field guy. And so you're going to see more off target throws, more uncatchable throws, that kind of stuff. So they're very different players. They're going to be in very, very different roles. Kong says, I would die for Kiko. I posted a picture of Kiko making friends with our chickens. It was really cute. And I agree, Kong. I would die for Kiko too. JC Hooker asks, is Henny a lock to be the number 2 quarterback over Buechele? If so, do we keep a third QB? The kid can play. Yes, on both. Like I said earlier, I think it's Henny's job to lose, and then I think it's going to be Buechele on the practice squad. I'm going to just do a couple more. Who makes the 53? Herring or Saunders? I think Saunders does. So I'm trying to just get these done quickly. Our NFL offense is better off with 1 top 5 receiver or 3 that are all top 50, but none in the top 20. If you had 3 top 50 wide receivers, but none in the top 20, if all 3 of them were legitimate top 50 guys, I think it depends on whether the best one, are you talking he's not in the top 20? Is he 21? Or are all of them like in the 40s? I think that matters a great deal. If one of them is even like a top 25-ish guy, like kind of a legitimate number 1 guy, I still think that's a toss-up. I do think you want one guy that's at least hovering around that top 20 spot. Otherwise, I think you're better off with a star, unless everyone else is just, like not even top, 100. I think I've made it through. This one's more of a joke. Do all great Chiefs content creators have a farm? Don't have a farm. I just have a few acres and a little room for a pup. So that, I think, gets us through it. This is a lot of fun. I forgot how hard it is to get through so many great mailbag questions quickly, efficiently. And if the word efficiently is doing a lot of work there. I appreciate you guys watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you get notifications of these videos. We're going to be doing this every Thursday. Again, look on Wednesday for the tweet asking for mailbag questions. Make sure to check out the Keys to the Kingdom every Monday or Tuesday, depending on how the week goes, when the Chiefs play, to detail everything we'll be going over in the week. We're going to be doing this every week here. I'm excited. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I appreciate you guys watching. It's a great week to be a Chiefs fan.